The opportunity came quietly, almost like a whisper, but it landed in Tamara's life like thunder. It was one of those exhausting afternoons where everything felt heavier than usual. The heat pressed down on her salon, the generator struggled outside, and the air carried the familiar mix of sweat, hair products, and frustration. Tamara stood for hours, braiding, twisting, styling, her hands skilled, her mind far away. Business had not been good for months. Customers praised her, admired her work, even recommended her, but admiration did not pay rent. At the end of most days, when she counted her earnings, the money always seemed too small for the size of her responsibilities, and those responsibilities were not small. As the first child, Tamara carried her family on her shoulders like an invisible load that never shifted. Her mother worked hard but was growing weaker with time. Her two younger sisters looked up to her with hope in their eyes, hope she was beginning to feel she could not sustain. At night, sleep rarely came easily. Thoughts crowded her mind, unpaid bills, rising prices, her mother's health, her sister's future. Sometimes she would lay awake, staring into darkness, wishing for something, anything that could change their lives. She didn't just want money, she wanted escape. That afternoon, while she worked on a client's hair, someone new walked into the salon. The woman was calm, observant, and unusually quiet. She sat down without saying much, simply watching as Tamara walked. There was nothing flashy about her, but there was something about her presence that made the air feel different. When it was her turn, Tamara began working on her hair as usual. It started like a normal conversation. Simple questions, polite answers, but slowly the direction shifted. The woman noticed Tamara's skill. She commented on her speed, her neatness, her professionalism, but instead of stopping there, she said something that lingered. She spoke about opportunity, about leaving the country, about a different life. At first, it sounded like one of those things people say casually. Big dreams with no real path. But this time there was a path, an agency, a system, a plan. Hairdressers were being taken abroad to work. Everything would be arranged: travel, accommodation, connection. In return, the agency would take only a portion of whatever was earned for a limited time. It sounded simple, too simple. But to someone like Tamara, someone who had been searching for a way out, it sounded like a door opening in a wall she had been pushing against for years. By the time the woman left the salon, she had given Tamara a number, and with that number came something dangerous: hope. That afternoon, Tamara returned home with a different kind of energy. The small house felt the same: tight, modest, filled with signs of struggle, but her perspective had shifted. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't just thinking about survival, she was thinking about change. She shared everything with her family. Her sisters reacted with excitement. Their imaginations had already started racing ahead to a better future. Her mother, however, responded differently. She listened carefully, quietly, weighing every word. There was joy, yes, but also caution. In the end, she said little. Instead, she chose prayer. If it was good, it would stand. If it was not, it would fall apart. That night, Tamara met the call. The conversation on the phone felt structured, almost too organized to doubt. The agency representative spoke confidently, outlining everything with precision. There would be no stress about travel arrangements. All she needed to do was prepare a list of personal items. A timeline was given: 5 days. Everything was moving so fast, but instead of fear, excitement took over. For the next few days, the house became a place of preparation. Money was gathered from different sources, including loans her mother quietly took from friends. They went to the market, bought everything on the list: clothes, toiletries, a travel box, even warm clothing for a place Tamara had never seen before. Her mother went a step forward and got her a new phone. It was a sacrifice. Tamara noticed, but she didn't stop her because now she believed this was the breakthrough they had been waiting for. As the days passed, the reality of her departure settled in. Tamara redid her hair, making sure she looked neat and representable. She packed her things carefully, imagining the life ahead of her, a better job, better pay, a chance to finally lift her family out of hardship. But there was one instruction that stood out. She was told not to tell anyone about her plans. It felt strange, but not strange enough to stop her, so she kept quiet. On the fourth day, Tamara left for Abuja. The journey felt like a step into a new world. Everything ahead of her seemed full of promise. When she arrived, she met representatives from the agency at a hotel where young women like her were gathered. They all had similar stories, similar hopes, similar desperation. That alone made everything feel more real. There was paperwork, documents, a letter. Tamara didn't take time to read it carefully. Her mind was already focused on the destination, not the process. So she signed, happily, without hesitation, without questions. That night, as she lay in the hotel room, surrounded by strangers who felt oddly familiar, Tamara looked around her. A better life was waiting. A stronger family was hoping on her. A vision of herself that no longer struggled. She smiled to herself in the dark. For the first time in a long time, everything felt possible. She didn't know then that not every open door leads to freedom. Morning came with movement. Quiet, hurried movement. No one spoke too much, yet everyone seemed to understand that something important had begun. Bags were packed, faces were serious, and there was a sheer tension in the air, half excitement, half uncertainty. Tamara followed the others without question. They were led by a woman everyone referred to as Miss Jane. She carried herself with authority, walking ahead like someone who had done this for many times before. The group of young women trailed behind her, each holding onto their own thoughts, their own dreams. Soon, they were directed into a bus. It wasn't anything special, just a regular vehicle. But to Tamara, it felt like a bridge between two worlds. The moment she stepped in, something inside her shifted. There was no turning back now. The journey began quietly. Some of the girls scrolled through their phones, probably sending last messages to loved ones. Others leaned against the window, watching the road stretch endlessly ahead. A few closed their eyes, trying to sleep. Tamara sat still. Her phone rested in her hands, but she wasn't using it. Instead, she stared ahead, her thoughts louder than anything around her. She imagined her mother smiling without worry. She imagined her sisters in better schools, wearing clean uniforms, confident and proud. She imagined herself sending money home, real money, enough to change everything. The thought alone filled her heart with warmth. It was it. This was her chance. The road stretched on. Hours turned into a full day. A full day turned into two. Two became three. By the fourth day, the journey no longer felt exciting. It felt endless. The bus stopped occasionally, but never for long. The surroundings began to change, slowly becoming unfamiliar. The air felt different. The roads, the people, even the silence. It all carried a sense of distance from everything Tamara had ever known. Still, no one complained. They had come too far for that. Finally, they arrived. There was no grand welcome, no bright lights, no sign of the better life Tamara had imagined. Instead, there was quiet, a strange, heavy quiet. Miss Jane led them down a path that seemed to cut through a thick, isolated area. The deeper they walked, the more uneasy Tamara began to feel. Then she saw them, dogs, large, alert, and held firmly by security men at the entrance of a gated compound. Tamara slowed slightly. Something about the scene didn't sit right with her. But before her thoughts could fully form, the others were already moving forward, and she followed. She told herself it was just security. After all, important places had tight protection, right? Inside the compound, things didn't improve. They were taken into a building and directed into a room. A small room. Too small. Mats were spread across the floor. No beds, no proper space. 6 girls were assigned to that same room. Tamara stood still for a moment, her mind trying to process what she was seeing. This wasn't what she imagined, but no one spoke. One by one, the girls began arranging their boxes quietly, as if silence was safer than questions. Tamara did the same. Evening came slowly. Hunger followed. The girls sat together on the floor, waiting. Surely food would come. Surely this was just a temporary arrangement. But night fell and nothing came. No food, no explanation, just silence. One by one, they lay down on the mats, their bodies tired, their stomachs empty, their minds beginning to whisper doubts they had been ignoring. Tamara stared into the darkness. For the first time since she left home, she felt something close to fear. Morning came early, too early. By 5 a.m., they were all woken up and told to get ready. There was no time for questions. They were led out again, this time towards a large building. As they got closer, Tamara noticed something strange. Bundles, machines, synthetic strands. Then it became clear. It was not a salon. It was a factory. A place where hair was being produced, not styled. Confusion spread across the group like a ripple. This was not what they came for. They had expected chairs, clients, styling tools. Not this. But confusion quickly turned into pressure. They were told to learn, to adjust, to work. There was no room for refusal. Days turned into routine, a harsh one. They woke up before sunrise, worked from early morning until late at night, returned to their rooms exhausted. There was no proper rest, no communication with the outside world, no contact with family. At some point, their phones were all collected. The explanation sounded simple, that they needed to focus, that distraction would slow them down. But once the phones were gone, so was their connection to everything they had left behind. Food came only once a day, in the evening. It was never enough, but hunger didn't leave them with options. They ate, they endured, they walked. Whispers began to grow among the girls. Stories started to come out. Some had been introduced to the opportunity by friends, others by distant relatives, a few by people they trusted deeply. Each story carried the same pattern: promises, hope, and now regrets. One question kept repeating in their conversations: if this opportunity was truly good, why didn't the people who introduced it take it themselves? No one had an answer. That night, the room was filled with quiet sobs. Not loud, not dramatic, just soft, broken sounds of people missing home, missing freedom, missing the life they once complained about. Tamara felt it too, more than she expected. Her mother's face haunted her thoughts. Her sister's laughter echoed in her memory. And now there was no way to reach them. Somewhere in that darkness, she found a friend, Olivia. They didn't become close instantly, but shared suffering has a way of connecting people quickly. They talked in whispers at night, sharing pieces of their lives, holding onto memories like lifeless. Those conversations became their escape, their only comfort. But deep down, something was changing in Tamara. The hope that brought her here was fading, and in its place, a quiet determination was beginning to grow. Time lost its meaning inside that place. Days no longer felt like days. They felt like repetitions of the same long, exhausting moment. The sun would rise and they would wake up. The sun would set and they would return to the same cramped room. Nothing changed except the growing weight in their hearts. For Tamara, the reality had settled in. This was not a stepping stone. This was a trap. At first, she tried to enjoy it. She told herself it was temporary. She told herself maybe things would improve. She told herself she just needed to be patient. But patience began to feel like punishment. The work never reduced. The food never increased. The promises never came. Not even once did they receive any payment. Not even a sign of it. And slowly, the truth became impossible to ignore. They were not building a future. They were being used. The factory became a place of silence, not because there was nothing to say, but because everybody was tired to speak. Machines hummed, materials moved, supervisors watched, and the girls worked without pause. From 5 in the morning to 10 at night. Every day, no weekends, no breaks, just survival. At night, when the room filled again with tired bodies, the conversations changed. They were no longer about dreams, they were about regrets. Some blamed themselves, some blamed the people who introduced them. Some simply cried quietly, unable to talk. Tamara listened more than she spoke, but inside her, something was rising. A question that refused to go away. How long will I stay here? Her thoughts began to sharpen. She started noticing things that she had ignored before. The movement of the security men, the timing of their shifts, the behavior of the dogs, the moments when the compound felt less guided. At first, it was unconscious. Then it became intentional. She was studying, watching, calculating. The idea didn't come suddenly. It grew slowly, like a simple flame in the dark. Escape. At first, it sounded impossible. The place was isolated. The compound was guided. They had no phones, no money, no clear direction. But the more she thought about staying, the more living became the only option. One night, after an exhausting day, Tamara lay awake while others slept. Her body was tired, but her mind refused to rest. She thought about her mother. She imagined her waiting, hoping, praying. She thought about her sisters, probably asking questions no one could answer. A deep pain settled in her chest. She had to leave. But now she couldn't even reach them. Tears slipped quietly down her face. That was a moment something changed completely. Not just fear, not just regret, but decision. From that night, Tamara became different. During the day, she walked like everyone else, but her eyes were always observing. She noticed that at certain times, the security guards gathered towards the back area of the compound. She noticed that the gate was not always tightly monitored. She noticed patterns. She memorized them. Days passed, then weeks. Her plan slowly took shape. She didn't rush. She couldn't afford mistakes. One wrong move could make everything worse. So she waited and watched. There was one more problem. Olivia. Tamara had tried to convince herself to live alone. It would be easier, safer, less complicated. But every time she thought about it, something inside her resisted. Olivia had become more than just a friend. She was a piece of home in a place that felt like captivity. Leaving her behind didn't feel right, but taking her along meant more risks, more noise, more chances of being caught. The decision weighed heavily on her until one night she made up her mind. It was late. The room was quiet, filled with the slow breathing of exhausted bodies. Tamara gently reached out and tapped Olivia. Once, twice, Olivia stared, confused and half asleep. Tamara leaned closer and whispered softly, barely audible. No long explanations, no dramatic words, just enough to make her understand. At first, Olivia looked confused. Then her eyes widened. Fear, hope, uncertainty. At once, but in the end, she nodded. Tamara's heart pounded. This was it. No more waiting, no more planning, only action. They moved carefully, slowly, making sure not to wake anyone else. The room remained silent. The compound outside was quiet. Everything felt too still. Step by step, they made their way out. Every sound felt louder than it should. Every movement felt risky, but they didn't stop. They couldn't. When they reached the gates, Tamara froze for a second. Her heart raced. This was the moment that could decide everything. She pushed it gently, and to her surprise, it opened. No lock, no resistance, just a quiet path forward. They stepped out, carefully closed it behind them, and then they ran. Not slowly, not carefully, but with everything they had. The forest around them felt endless, dark, unfamiliar. Branches brushed against them, the ground uneven beneath their feet. But they didn't look back. They couldn't. They ran like their lives depended on it. Because in that moment, it felt like they did. They didn't stop running. Not when their legs began to ache. Not when their breaths grew heavy. Not even when fear tightened around their chest like a grip they couldn't shake. Tamara and Olivia ran through the darkness, as if the night itself was chasing them. Every sound behind them felt like danger. Every movement in the bushes made their hearts jump. But they kept going. Forward was the only option. The forest seemed endless. Time stretched in a way that made seconds feel like minutes. Their feet stumbled on the roots and stones. Their clothes catching on branches, but they didn't slow down. They couldn't afford to. Tamara's mind was racing, just fast as her body. What if they noticed? What if they came after them? What if they didn't make it out? But another thing pushed her harder. What if this is your only chance? After what felt like forever, the thick forest began to thicken out. The air changed. The ground became clearer. And then a road. A real road. For a moment, they both slowed down, almost not believing it. They had made it out. They stood there, breathing heavily, their bodies trembling, not just from exhaustion, but from everything they had escaped from. Cars passed occasionally, headlights cutting through the darkness. Tamara looked at Olivia. No words were needed. They were not safe yet. They began asking for directions. Their voices were shaking. Their appearance grew attention, but they kept going until someone finally pointed them towards the police station. That word alone felt like hope. When they got there, everything came pouring out. Not in perfect sentences, not in quiet explanations, but in broken words, scattered details, and raw emotion. They explained that they were stranded, that they needed help, that they wanted to go back home. From there, things began to move differently. Authorities got involved. Questions were asked. Arrangements were made. And for the first time in a long while, Tamara felt something she had almost forgotten. Relief. The next day, they were taken to the immigration office. Processes were done. Documents were handled. And then, they were placed on a plane back to Nigeria. Inside the plane, emotions were overwhelming. Tamara sat quietly, staring ahead, her hands resting in her lap. Beside her, Olivia wiped her tears. They were both crying, but not for the same reason alone. They were crying because they had survived. They were crying because they were going home. They were crying because others were still there. That part alone hurt them the most. When the plane landed, reality hit again. Nigeria. Home. But not the same version they left. Tamara's return was not the joyful celebration she once imagined. When she finally got home, the atmosphere was heavy. Her mother was sick, very sick. The stress, the worry, the silence, everything had taken a toll on her. High blood pressure had weakened her, and the uncertainty of not hearing from her daughter had made it even worse. The moment Tamara saw her, her heart broke. This was a life she wanted to fix, and somehow she had almost lost herself trying to fix it. There were tears, long embraces, silence filled with emotions too deep for words. Her sisters held onto her like they were afraid she might disappear again. When Tamara finally found the strength to speak, she told them everything. Every detail, the journey, the conditions, the work, the hunger, the silence, the escape. Nothing was hidden. Her mother listened quietly. No interruptions, no judgment, just deep, painful understanding. That experience changed everything. Not just for Tamara, but for her entire family. They learned something that stayed with them forever. Not every opportunity is a blessing. Some come dressed like answers, but hide problems far worse than the ones you are trying to escape. Tamara returned to her salon. The same place, the same chair, the same cracked mirror, but she was no longer the same person. There was a new strength in her, a deep awareness, a kind of wisdom that only experience could give. She still worked hard, still braided hair, still struggled sometimes, but she never forgot what she had seen, and she never stopped sharing her story. Because somewhere out there, another Tamara might be listening, another girl might be desperate, another family might be hoping. And if her story could stop even one person from walking into danger disguised as opportunity, then everything she went through would not be in vain. The end.